A quick introduction to assignment 2 for Unit 3 information systems. So first of all, you'll probably need to fill out this document here, which asks for your name. So your name will go in there, obviously, and it also asks for the day you actually submitted this. The handing in date officially is the 10th of the 11th. We handed it out the 11th of the 10th, which was last Tuesday. So we're going to basically be requiring them in the week after half term. Okay, so straight away, there's only two parts to this. There's P3, which is explain the issues related to the use of information. And there's M2, which is assess how issues related to the use of information affect an organisation. Now it's quite a strange one because we're actually using some sort of simulation for this. So we'll go down now to the actual scenario. So this assessment's based on the simulated business, which you can try yourself. These are links to the actual different games. So there's 4 different games there. I've not actually spent a lot of time on them myself, but basically they all have the same concept, which is you run a simulated business and you try and make as much profit as possible. So the Lemonade Millionaire one, for example, you run a little corner store. You have to decide how many lemons, how much water, how many paper cups you're going to buy, and all this sort of stuff. So basically you go into the warehouse, suppliers like Booker's, you're buying all those things, you're going out, you don't know exactly what the weather's going to be, but you've got a rough idea before you buy everything, and then you try and make as much profit as possible. And the worst thing that can probably happen is that you run out before the end of the day, and possibly the best thing that can happen is you make to maximise your amount of profit. So you're going to run a simulated business. So you can use these as a simulated business, or you can just imagine a simulated business of your own choosing. You're going to collect various information from the simulated business. So if you're looking at Lemonade Millionaire, you can be getting loads of sort of information about different times you played this, about the different weather conditions, about the different sort of amounts you purchased and how much you purchased compared to which weather conditions, which sort of amount of profit you made. And if you're really canny about it and you really dedicate yourself to playing this game for a few hours on end, you probably could work out a beneficial sort of ratio depending on different weather conditions. However, it's all pretty well commonsensical, and at the end of it you're going to get certain data. So every company, every business has a good amount of data. Think of everything from supermarkets, which have data about every single purchase a particular customer might make via a club card type system, to companies like wholesalers who require some sort of membership, to Costco, who also requires a membership, to just a corner shop that basically doesn't know who your customers are, doesn't retain information about the customers, but at the end of the day they know what sales were particularly good on which types of days, and you can convert those days into information about the particular days, like the weather. On warm days you're going to sell more cold drinks, you're going to sell more ice cream, you're going to sell more stuff like that. So task 1. So task 1 is you're going to create a little report. Now in session I've passed around and I've put on Google Classroom some report layouts. I think I'll give you a selection of 2 of them, so you can go for whichever you prefer. Don't stick directly to the report layout. You can change certain things within reason. Keep to the main layout of the report layout if possible, but you can change the subheadings and stuff like that. So you're going to write a little report to explain to your fellow directors. So therefore you are a director in this company. You have to explain to your fellow directors any issues you think relating to the use of information that requires that your business takes any special measures, any precautions, and so on. In that regard, you're going to be looking at any legal issues in particular. Now, it doesn't refer to the latest legislation, General Data Protection Regulations. However, I think if I was you, I would be looking at that, and I've put information about that on there, particularly because the fines under the GDPR is extremely high. It's 4% of income, which doesn't sound a lot, but it's 4% of all the money coming into a company, irrespective of if that company makes a profit or a loss. The Data Protection Act used to have fines up to like 10, 20, 30,000 pounds, even higher on occasions, but most companies would treat them as a minimum sort of business cost they could possibly get away with if they appealed, and it may not be as much as the maximum fine anyway. So there's other legislation. The Freedom of Information Act, that's particularly useful when you're dealing with local authorities or any organisation which is funded by central government. There's the Computer Misuse Act, which basically allows some sort of legislation which has penalties if anyone breaks the Data Protection Act. That's where that came in, and that came in only a year or two later. And there's other legislation, but they're the ones which you really they've asked you to look at in particular. You've also got ethical issues. As an employer, you have the ethical issues to your staff. You may have to have some sort of whistleblowing policy in place. You may have to have some sort of ethical stance on how you deal with purchasing of raw materials and things like this. But for this assignment, we're looking mainly at the data, and there's certain ethical issues you may need to consider when holding large amounts of data about your customers and about information you hold about their purchases with your particular company. And then operational issues. So we're looking at securing that information, we're looking at making sure that information is backed up, we're looking at all the health and safety implications in regard to any of this data, business, continuance plan. So basically a disaster recovery plan, I think, is often what it's called. So some sort of plan which takes account of any possible disaster you could ever imagine, including a pandemic, because now we've had one. Every data recovery plan or every business continuance plan would have to think about that and what would happen in those situations. We have to think about any organisational policies. We have to think about the cost of all this, and we should include maybe possibly a case study or some sort of example of issues you've discussed or thought of in regard to this within your report. So this is a formal report, and it's putting a case forward. And again, go back to the report layout, because basically what you do a report is you outline what your report is, you have the body of the report, and then you conclude and make note of any particular recommendations. So for task 2, you're going to add a second section to your report entitled Possible Effects of the Issues on Our Business. I would suggest that you use exactly that title, maybe even add M2 as the actual part of that title, so it's easy for not only myself but particularly the external verifier to actually find that additional evidence. So in here we're going to expand your report. Okay, so we're going to show how each of the issues which you've already described, so all those things you've already looked at about contingency planning, about health and safety, about backing up and all that other stuff, we have to expand upon that. So how does that particularly affect your business? So what it's really saying is, in the first part for the report we could talk generally about a business, but for this task, for task 2, this is a merit task. We're evaluating particularly about your particular imaginary business. So how does your particular imaginary business, how will it be affected by those things you've already made note of in the first part of your report? So you could make effective use of examples. Again, it's talking about putting a case study together. A case study is basically talking about a particular setting. People write case studies about unique settings which they come to conclusions which wouldn't make sense in any other setting whatsoever. But in that one particular setting, it's actually particularly very important. So it's in research what we call a cross-sectional piece of research. It's talking about what's happening in that particular point of time in that particular area, whereas a longitudinal section of research will be something which happens over time, or be possibly over many years. But a case study is a good piece of cross-sectional research. And you might want to use a case study just to illustrate your point, is what they're saying. You don't have to use a case study. You could just talk in broad terms about how it would affect your imaginary company. And that's basically it. Now, what I have also put at the bottom is I've also put down for the grading, which is the same grading BTEC use. So for a pass, you get 7 points. So this is the grading you'll get on Google Classroom. It seems very, small, and you need to get something like 150 points to get a distinction. And we can see where you get these points from each year. So 7 points is for a pass, 8 points for a merit, and 9 points for a distinction. Now obviously for this piece of work there's no distinction task available, so the most you will be able to get is a number 8, which is for a merit. Okay. Any feedback, any concerns I have, I will put through Google Classroom, so keep an eye out for any emails. I will put all my notes on Google Classroom as well as put copies of them onto the actual document, the assessment grade document, which will be attached. Any problems, give me a shout. Look forward to speaking to you all soon.